This is a video that I've really been looking forward to sharing with you. We're going to take a walk through the forest. It's something that I do every fall. Maybe call it cruising the forest or cruising the timber. Try to get an inventory on what's going on, what happened this summer. Start preparing firewood for next year. I like to work 12 months in advance. The majority of the firewood that I'll be burning this year is already down on the ground. It's been drying throughout the summer, but now we need to go through and kind of find out what we're going to cut and what we're going to thin and cull for next year. We'll also go down and take a look and see how our firs and Dougs did that we planted. We planted 1,000 trees down in the lower pasture this spring. It was a really hard year on trees. I have because of the drought and just how dry it was this year. I have a friend who's a forester. We were just talking, and the company that he works for, he said that in some of their plantings they're going to expect a 50% loss this year, which is really, really high. And I would say that I probably will experience not something too far from that, maybe even higher. So this sign you see here, this is a sign that was given to me by the state, and what it signifies is that we have agreed to and promised to maintain a stewardship forest. That's maintaining a forest or a stand of timber that uses the best practices. A sustainable forest, one that we can take things from, but we're not taking without giving back. And the giving back means getting rid of invasive species that don't belong, introducing species that would have been here had they not been wiped out or almost wiped out by the last century of poor logging practices, and well, just all of those things that come with it that contribute to that. I think the best thing to do for us is just let's go and take a walk. We'll take a look at some things. We'll talk about good stewardship. We'll talk about how to manage a forest a little bit, how to select what trees to thin and what trees to keep and why. We'll talk a little. We'll see how some of the forests have regenerated, the areas that we have cleared and have put a lot of time into, and I think you'll enjoy it. So let's just go. Let's just go and go for our cruise right now. One of the things that I'm really proud of is we've put a lot of effort into kind of reestablishing the native apple trees. These are trees here that came back. They used to grow all over in the area here, and they're some of the most delicious apples I've ever had. And most of them were cleared out to make way for wheat and alfalfa, different things that the ranchers and farmers would grow. But fortunately, some of them kept a foothold in here, and when we first came here, this one in particular was in really bad shape. It had never really been trimmed. It wasn't producing anything of any value, and so this is the third year I've trimmed it back. I keep trimming and trimming and looking after it, and this here for the first year we're starting to get some really nice apples. One thing it's really great to see is how well these apples are doing. Look at the size of these. When we, again, as we first came here, these things were just tiny, little hard, little sour apples, no value, but just after 3 years, what a difference this has made. They're just absolutely the most beautiful apples. So this is the first area that we cleared here, just behind me. This is, we called this the Elderberry Bridge. This is one of the bridges built by the subscribers that came to our open house last year. And I've been so happy to see how well that this is regenerated. When we first came here, this forest was so thick that you couldn't fight your way through it. It was very diseased and unhealthy. And now what I'm going to show you is 3 years after the clearing and how wonderfully it's coming back. And well, let's just go. We'll go see it. So I wish I had a before and after picture to show you, but this is the elderberry stand right here that's been opened up and thinned out. There's a really nice mix of Doug fir. We've got ponderosa in here. We've got grand fir. But the thing that you'll really notice is the ground cover of how well that's doing. One of the native plants here to this area is the Oregon grape. You can see none of these were growing in here. They weren't doing very well because they weren't getting any sun, and there was just so many things competing for them. And now once we've got this all opened up and the sunshine's coming through, it's incredible to see how quickly the trees are growing. And there's this, you can really see how well they're doing also by all of the cones that they're throwing. This is the western side. We've got the western side of these trees that are reseeding themselves. These are grand firs here. But the reason why you'll see them on the west side of the tree is because we have a prominent east wind and it blows the cones and they'll start reseeding in here. It's nice to see these coming back, however, we want to keep an eye on them and we don't want these growing. We'll come in here and continue to pull these out because we'll get back into what we had before, which is a dense stand that just becomes too thick. This little area, we're talking about a 3-foot square area. There are probably over almost 40 trees in there. That's just too much. So that's something we'll have to come in and cull and look after. So it's pretty easy to identify the different types of conifers. I guess the primaries, of course, the ponderosa is going to have those long needles like this, and they have a real, they're really pointy. They're really sharp on the ends. Those are the easiest to identify. What's not quite so easy is to identify the Doug firs from the red firs. If you look at this here, you'll see this is a white fir. A white fir is going to have a star pattern. It's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, usually 5, sometimes 6 like that, but a perfect symmetrical tree. When you look at them on the horizon, they have a real classic Christmas tree, kind of a cultured Christmas tree look. And they also will have long, thick, the needles are really heavy, they're kind of shiny on the top, and they've got white stripes if you look close there. Now if we contrast that with the Doug firs, here's a Doug fir here, it's much more lacy. You can see a little bit different color of green sometimes, and they're not growing flat. You see how these will kind of grow out flat? The Doug firs will have a tendency to be a little bit more prickly, more round-like. And the needles are finer, they're softer, and the branches don't grow in the symmetrical pattern. They kind of grow higgledy-piggledy, all different ways. Both of them are really nice trees. I prefer the Doug fir because it's just better for building with and lumber, but it's important to have a good variety of species, not just one monoculture. So when you're going through your stand, you got to make determinations on which trees you want to use for lumber, or primarily which ones you want to use for firewood. I always come and make special notes of trees that have major defects in them. This Doug fir right here is probably close to 75 years old or so, but it's got a lot of major defects. You can see it's got a snow break right there, a big snow break. So when it was littler, the snow broke the top off and continued to grow. If we follow it up there another 40 feet or so, we see a second snow break. Now this tree is healthy enough, but it's just not a real marketable tree. It's not a very pretty tree. So if I was going to choose between which tree to cut and which one to keep, this would be one that I would take down because I've got a good 30 feet of good marketable timber there we can use on the sawmill. We got another stick right there, and then plenty of firewood on all of the branches. This would be the one we would want to take, and not so much over these that are growing correctly and growing nice. You can see right there, here's a good example of the white fir. That's the white fir. Do you see how symmetrical it is? Or some people will call it the grand fir. It's really, it looks like a classic Christmas tree. This one to the left right there, now that's your Doug fir or your red fir. And that has got much longer branches. It's asymmetrical. It kind of grows a little bit more. You could just see the two right there. That's a really great contrast on how you could tell the white from the red. So as I'm cruising, what I'm going to do is I may or may not take this one for firewood for next year, but I'm just trying to get an inventory and an idea of what we have, and keeping track of how much wood we have. And we want to be sure not cut so much. We want to keep replanting because our goal is to be able to plant as much as we're taking away. But this having all the defects that it does, I'll mark this as a potential, or a tree that has a high potential for becoming firewood. Having these marked with the pink ribbons will help me to really get a quick inventory. As I walk through here, I can look at this tree and estimate, okay, this is going to give me between probably 1.5 cords of wood, maybe close to 2. And so I have a really good idea. I know that I need between 3 and 5 cords to get through the winter. It just really helps me get a kind of a visual idea of what I have as far as inventory or available firewood. So here is a sure sign of fall. This is a vine maple. These trees are beautiful here. These trees will turn, these leaves will turn bright yellow, bright red, all different colors. They'll just look like they're on fire, but you can see they're starting to turn. So as we start getting those cold nights, you start seeing those vine maples turning, you know that winter is on its way. Another great way of identifying what species you have is by the bark. This here is the bark of a red fir or a Doug fir. You can tell by the bark, or the cones even. The cones will tell you this is a classic Doug fir cone. But the red firs have a real heavy bark like this. It's really resistant to wildfire, so they're really good in this area. I've seen these trees burn up and the bark burn and be all charred, and they'll survive. The nice thing, another interesting fact about these trees is that the wildfires that come through is the perfect temperature to cause the tree to throw its cones, and it regenerates really quickly. So having a ground fire that comes through that doesn't get up into the crown of the tree, but just works on the bark or everything, will really inhibit growth, and it's really good for the forest. Here's an example of how not to leave stumps. This was something that was left by previous loggers, where they'll just cut the cream out of the tree and just leave this standing up. It's not very aesthetically pleasing. It really looks like a scar upon the land to me. I have a very different way of dealing with stumps that I think is much more pleasing and gives the forest a much more natural look than leaving them like this. This right here is a technique for dealing with stumps that I learned from my friend Joe Salatin of Polyface Farms, and he called it kind of, or I don't know what he called it, I call it kind of mushrooming a stump. That's taking it down as close to the ground as you can and cutting these facets on it, giving it that round, that mushroom look. It does a couple different things. First off, it just looks so much nicer, it looks so much more organic. And what it does is it leaves a stump that's not going to hang up and get caught on things. If you're skidding logs or you're doing selective thinning or logging, if you're pulling things through the forest, it won't catch. It'll deflect it. I just love this method. It takes a little bit more work and effort, but just from the way it looks and the way it just leaves the land when you're done, you don't feel like someone's come through and clear cut and just ravaged the forest. It looks to me to be much more natural. When you start talking to experts about how a forest should look or how it should be left, you're going to have many schools of thought. When we deal with DNR foresters, they're coming from a perspective, they want the entire forest to be just scoured clean and look like a park. Limbed up, they're basically, the only thing they're really concerned about is having a forest that's resistant to wildland fire. That's fine and it looks nice and it has a nice park feeling. It's not necessarily the best or healthiest type of a forest. So I kind of I'm on the fence about that. I talked to the conservatory folks and they're more like leaving a forest really wild and lots of brush. And so I kind of just try to find that fine balance. A lot of the limbs and different things we'll take off, I'll put in piles and I'll leave some of them around just like this. A lot of piles I'll mulch or I'll even burn slash piles to get rid of some of the fuel, but I have strategically placed piles like this because they're so wonderful for habitat. You got a place that rabbits and squirrels and small critters can get into and get away from and have safe refuge from the raptors, but not so much brush and slash where it's going to be a fire hazard. So it's really kind of a balancing act of what and where you leave, but just kind of keep that in mind. You want to keep the wildlife and the ability for this stuff to mulch into the soil, you got to keep that in mind as well. It's so difficult to try to share this with you and try to convey it in a short video format of what we're trying to do here and what we've accomplished, what we have left to do. The scale of it is just so big. As I've said in previous videos when I've talked about stewardship, when we first came upon this land and started to walk it and looking at it, and we started to become aware of how previous owners, how poorly they had managed the property, and how I think by and large it was the mindset was, what can we take from this land? How can we profit from this? It's very short-sighted without looking at the bigger picture. When I looked at the volume of work, the amount of things that needed to be done, it was just very daunting, and it was actually somewhat depressing. I thought, it's just hopeless, it's just so big. And we started in one little area, and I guess what made the big difference, or where my mind made the flip, was realizing that this is something that is not going to be done overnight, and this is not a job that needs to be completed. This is, as I'm fond of saying, this is my life's work. And will I get to it all? I won't. And will I get it to the place I'd like it to be, perfection? Not even close. But what I am able to do is I can start making changes, and I think the most satisfying thing about this is to be able to see all of the hard work and blood, sweat, and tears that go into managing something of this size, when you start to see some of the things I've shown you, and you start to see the native plants coming back and the trees thriving and replanting and the invasive species being eradicated, it is one of the most pleasing and satisfying things in life. I didn't really understand what true forest stewardship meant. I think most people don't. It always pains me, it hurts me to hear comments from folks that think that cutting down a tree is negatively affecting the forest in some way, but I guess what they don't understand is that we need to have our hands on it. We need to partake in this. We need to correct a lot of the errors and the mistakes that we've made over the last 100 years. It's incredible to me, and we're very fortunate that there's been a few people in this country that have had a vision for the bigger picture. I was just reading a biography on Teddy Roosevelt, and the fact that he, back in that day when man's opinion was, or idea was, it was us against nature, that we had to move to the west and we had to conquer the wilderness and we had to make it conform to our idea of perfection. But men like him and others, regardless of what you think about them, had a bigger picture vision, a bigger picture or a larger view. They were able to set aside these wild places, these amazing national parks that we have, whether it be Yellowstone or Yosemite, protect them from development, protect them from just being exploited and completely ruined for future generations. So I'm not working on that macro level, I'm working on a micro level, so what I can do here and what I can affect, hopefully, it will be something that I can pass down to my children, that they'll have something, they'll be able to have a place or to be able to walk with my grandkids, and something that I can be proud of and something that I can use to teach them, and that they have that mindset and get away from everything that we look around us to is something that it needs to be exploited, or it has yet to be exploited. That there are, yes, there's a time and a place. There's a need for timber. There's a need for responsible logging. But there's a better way. There's a better way to do it. There's a responsible way. And yes, it's not the most profitable, and it's not the easiest, and it's not the fastest. But I think it's the best way. And I think that the thing that transcends all of that, that's more important, is just the way it changes the way we start looking at our environment and looking at how we interact with it. It's not us against the environment. Yes, we need to shield ourselves to keep ourselves from warm and protected from the elements, but we need not destroy everything around us to have those things, that we can live harmoniously, that we can take what we need to provide for our families, but we can also supply and leave the things needed for the wildlife and for the animals and for our future generations. So it's been an incredible education for me. It's something that I am very passionate about. It's something that I am learning more and more about all the time. But yeah, how do you, I don't know how to share something like this on a YouTube video, but well, we'll do what we can. So thanks for watching, and it's firewood time. Going to be having some firewood videos coming up. My favorite time of the year is the fall, and I feel it. You have that need, that desire. I get no sleep until I have all the winter's wood in and everything buttoned up and ready for winter. So I'll be sharing a lot of that with you as it comes up. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next video.